The German invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939 is usually considered the start of World War II, but it also started as a regional war between neighbors. The Polish Second Republic declared independence in 1918, and its western borders were established by the Treaty of Versailles, although violent clashes in some former German regions continued until 1921. Its eastern borders, though, were only made official after a bitter war against Soviet Russia, which also ended in 1921. But neither Germany nor the Soviet Union are satisfied with the new order. They both view the Polish state as an illegitimate creation of the Versailles system that they both resent, and both maintain claims on Polish territory. Even so, Warsaw signs non-aggression pacts with Moscow in 1932 and with Berlin in 1934. This fragile balance, however, masks the intentions of Poland's neighbors. German dictator Adolf Hitler has long viewed imperial expansion to the east as essential to gaining Lebensraum for the German people, and he and many other Germans want to recover the land ceded to Poland in 1919. Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin's intentions are the subject of some debate. Some historians argue that he wants to reconquer the lands of the Tsarist Empire, others that he wants to extend the Soviet border as far to the west as possible as a security buffer, or even that he's just looking to seize any territory at all if given the chance. Regardless, the Soviet regime views Poles as an enemy, and they particularly target ethnic Poles in the USSR during the Great Terror of 1937-38. In 1938, Nazi Germany annexes part of Czechoslovakia after the Munich Agreement, and the Polish government also takes a small piece of Czechoslovakia with German consent. Warsaw had considered war with the USSR the most likely threat, but after Munich, Germany sets its sights on Poland. German Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop insists on a solution to what he calls the German-Polish question, including German claims on the free city of Danzig, formerly part of Germany, but overseen by the League of Nations and administered by Poland. Berlin also accuses Warsaw of disrupting agreed German access to its exclave province of East Prussia, and local German Nazis in Danzig cause unrest. The semi-authoritarian Polish government, led by Prime Minister Felician Składkowski, looks to France and Britain for help, and both governments promise to support the Poles if Germany attacks. By summer 1939, war seems imminent to Polish military commander Marshal Edward Rydz-Śmigły. We want to exhaust all possible efforts for a peaceful solution to the Danzig question. But if Germany insists on its annexation plan, Poland will fight, even if alone and without allies. The entire nation, to the last man and woman, is ready to fight for Poland's independence. And if we say we're going to war because of Danzig, it is a fight for our independence. Hitler doesn't think that Britain and France will keep their word, but he doesn't want to risk a two-front war either. So the German government offers the Soviets a deal. Even though the Nazis and Soviets are bitter ideological enemies from the opposite sides of the political spectrum, they share a common goal of overturning the existing order in Europe and expanding their empires. On August 23, 1939, they shock the rest of Europe and sign a non-aggression pact, sometimes called the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact after the two foreign ministers. In a secret protocol, they also agreed to divide Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. Germany can do as it likes in the former Czechoslovakia, Western Poland, and Lithuania, while the USSR has free reign in Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Eastern Poland, and Bessarabia. The stage is set for war. In late August, the Germans stage 4 false flag incidents along the border to provide a pretext for invasion. Men of the SS Security Service under Reinhard Heydrich dress in Polish uniforms and raid a radio station at Gleiwitz, a customs post, a railway station, a gamekeeper's hut, and a few other targets. The Germans bring with them 4 men from the Sachsenhausen concentration camp and a local Polish sympathizer, whom they put in Polish uniforms, murder, and photograph as supposed evidence of failed Polish aggression. The fact that most of these false flag ops don't work as planned is overshadowed by the coming invasion. The German plan, Case White, calls for an attack from north and south. 2 German armies will close the Danzig corridor and move south from East Prussia towards Warsaw, and 3 southern armies will move north towards the Polish capital and east towards Lwów, today's Lviv. The German-alliance Slovak state allows German troops to use its territory. German armoured and motorised divisions advancing with the support of the Luftwaffe will then trap Polish forces west of the Vistula. To carry out Case White, the Germans assemble 1.5 million men, 3,200 armoured vehicles and 2,000 planes. Most of their 2,000 tanks are smaller Panzer Is, IIs or Czech models. Just 300 are modern Panzer IIIs or IVs. Of 50 divisions, 6 are armoured and 4 motorised. The rest rely on horse-drawn transport. 3 Slovak divisions will also join. Opposing this force are about 1 million Poles in 38 infantry divisions, 1 motorised and 11 cavalry brigades. They have 1,100 armoured vehicles, but nearly all are small or outdated models. They lack anti-tank weapons and the air force is weak, with about 750 older models. At the urging of Britain and France, Poland delayed mobilizing for fear of provoking Germany, so by September 1st, only about half of Polish units are in their assigned defensive positions. The Polish plan is based on difficult choices, since their forces are weaker than the enemy. Concentrating their forces risks leaving valuable territory and resources unprotected, while defending the whole border means they'll be too thin to stop the enemy. Polish High Command decides to risk an all-round defense in the hope of resisting long enough for their French allies to launch their promised offensive 15 days after French mobilization. The morning of September 1st, Hitler falsely accuses the Polish army of firing onto German territory and announces that Germany is, quote, returning fire. German forces stream across the border, with the tank divisions aiming to break through and penetrate as far and as fast as possible to surround and isolate slower Polish forces into pockets. Aircraft like the Ju-87 Stuka ground attack planes hit Polish positions, logistics, and communications hubs to paralyze enemy command and control. Other German bombers hit Polish cities, not only for military purposes, but also to terrorize the civilian population. Some of the first shots of the war are fired by the German warship Schleswig-Holstein, which is supposed to be visiting Danzig on a friendship cruise, but instead supports the German assault on the peninsula of Westerplatte. The surprised garrison of 180 Polish troops resists furiously, but they're outnumbered and there's no hope of relief, so they surrender September 7th. Although the Germans quickly break through Polish lines in many places, many Polish units resist fiercely and hold up the German advance. A cavalry division holds up German tanks at Mokra, and at Krojanty, one action gives rise to a persistent myth of Polish cavalry senselessly charging German tanks. What really happens is that German tanks surprise a Polish unit of Ulan Lancers that is advancing to attack a German infantry unit, inflicting heavy casualties. An Italian war correspondent speaks to German tankers the next day, and his dramatized version of the story makes propaganda headlines across Germany, portraying German technological superiority and supposed Polish fanaticism. Other German war correspondents, like Kurt Frohwein, report a sanitized version from the front. This was the first Polish soldier I set eyes upon. A bloodied lump of human suffering, his legs drawn to his breast in pain, his face greenish and pale. We unbuttoned his blood-soaked tunic, and the German medic gave him a canteen of water. For the last time, a painful smile spread across his face as he whispered the German word Danke. He died soon after, and now rests under a decorated wooden cross. Polish command and control could not keep up with the confusion behind the lines and rapidly changing situation at the front. On September 3rd, Polish Minister for War General Tadeusz Kasprzycki gave the order for the defense of Warsaw. The speed of the German advance shocks the Poles, and many Polish formations are trapped in pockets of varying sizes. These usually resist as long as they can, but shortages of food and ammunition and relentless air attack mean they can't hold out for long. As the Polish army prepares to defend the capital, on September 3rd, Britain and France declare war on Germany. Many Poles see this as their only chance for salvation, and citizens like Halina Regulska celebrate. We embraced each other, kissed, hugged, and danced. Long live England! Now we won't die in this unequal fight. A few hours later, France declared war on Germany. In Warsaw, there's enthusiasm and demonstrations. Still, the promised French offensive should only start in 2 weeks. In the meantime, the Germans take Kraków without a fight on September 6th. On the 8th, German spearheads reach the outskirts of Warsaw, though Polish troops prevent them from entering. A German report reflects their difficulties entering the capital. It was pointless to try to break through here. The brigade ordered a retreat. Slowly, with their turrets facing rearwards, the tanks pulled back, giving each other covering fire. Riflemen, some of whom had panicked and retreated too early, blocked their path. On the tanks' hulls lay dead and wounded. The order to retreat didn't reach many of the tanks, and they were left behind. On the 9th, Polish forces in a large pocket west of Warsaw launch a major counterattack at the Battle of the Bzura. They try to push the Germans back to break out and to prevent the encirclement of Warsaw. The fighting is the heaviest of the entire campaign, and although the Germans divert troops away from Warsaw and some Polish units do escape to the capital, German pressure on the ground and relentless air attack reduce the pocket in about a week. Around the same time, the Germans break the last Polish defenses in the north at Wiesna. Day by day, more Polish pockets surrender, and German forces surround Warsaw by September 15th. The Germans demand the city's unconditional surrender, but the Poles refuse. The Germans worry that the Poles might try to form a new line in the east between Brest-Litovsk and Lwów, but German forces reach Lwów first. Meanwhile, German planes relentlessly pound Polish cities, including the capital. On Grochów Boulevard, which was jammed with traffic, German fighters hunted from 100 meters up and fired with machine guns on refugees, military units streaming into Warsaw, and women on their way to pick potatoes in the fields. The corpses and horse carcasses lay in the street until evening, since another attack might start at any moment. With Warsaw surrounded and the Polish army in tatters, Poland's faint hopes rest on the promised French offensive. But instead of a full-scale attack on Germany's weakly defended Western Front, the French and British do little. The French make a limited advance for a few days, then withdraw to the Maginot Line. Instead, on September 17th, the Soviet Union joins the fighting on the German side. From the German point of view, Soviet entry can't come soon enough. They're so concerned about Britain and France that Berlin had been asking Moscow to join from the first days of September. Although Moscow allows the Germans to use naval facilities at Murmansk and radio stations for the Luftwaffe in Minsk, they need time to mobilize troops and end their border conflict with Japan in Mongolia. The Wehrmacht's quicker than expected advance, though, makes Stalin worry that his new partner might not respect their secret deal. The Soviets also want to avoid being seen as full aggressors, so they prepare pretexts in a note that Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov hands the Polish ambassador in Moscow. The Polish government has disintegrated and no longer shows any sign of life. This means that the Polish state and its government have, in point of fact, ceased to exist. The Soviet government also cannot view with indifference the fact that kindred Ukrainian and Belarusian people who live on Polish territory and who are at the mercy of fate should be left defenseless. The reality that the Polish government and army both still exist and are resisting the Germans makes little difference. Red Army orders urge the troops to aid the workers and peasants rebelling against their Polish landlords, but there is no such rebellion. Two Red Army fronts with about 470,000 men, 4,000 tanks, 5,500 guns, and 2,000 aircraft cross the border. Facing them are 350,000 Polish troops, but many of them are unarmed reservists, and there's little in the way of heavy weapons. Many Poles are taken by complete surprise, and some, like Janusz Bardach, wonder whether the Red Army might in fact be coming to help them. Two men shined flashlights in our eyes, while others surrounded us. I was astonished to see Soviet military uniforms and hear the Russian language. We were still a long way from the border. I couldn't imagine what Soviet soldiers were doing on Polish territory, and could only hope that the mighty Red Army had come to fight the Nazis and expel them from Poland. I wanted to express my joy at seeing them, but someone ordered us to put up our hands. Some locals, mostly Ukrainians, Belarusians, and Jews, do welcome the Soviets in the hopes they'll be better treated than by the Polish authorities. Fighting is limited, though Polish troops fend off Soviet tanks at Grodno using Molotov cocktails and machine guns for 2 days. At Lviv, which is already besieged by the Wehrmacht but in the Soviet zone, German and Soviet commanders briefly consider a joint assault before the Germans withdraw. On September 22nd, in a show of cooperation, German and Soviet troops hold a joint parade in Brest-Litovsk, complete with victory arches decorated with swastikas and red stars. This was the same city where Soviet Russia and Germany had signed a peace treaty in 1918. The ceremony is observed by Generals Heinz Guderian and Semyon Krivoshein, who is Jewish, and they chat together in French. London and Paris are appalled by Soviet actions, but they don't feel they can risk war with the USSR on top of war with Germany. British Ambassador in Moscow, William Speeds, is blunt. I do not myself see what advantage war with the Soviet Union would be to us, though it would please me personally to declare it on Mr. Molotov. As the German and Soviet armies take control of most of Poland, in the occupied zones they quickly impose a reign of terror. Since the Soviets and Germans insist the Polish state does not exist, they consider Polish citizens under occupation to have no rights or protections. The Nazis consider Slavic Poles and Polish Jews, who make up 10% of the population, as subhumans who should be enslaved, killed, or driven away. SS Commander Reinhard Heydrich emphasizes that the first priority is to eliminate Polish elites. The people must be shot or hanged immediately without trial. The little people we want to spare, but the nobles, priests, and Jews must be killed. But it wasn't just the SS that committed atrocities from the very start of the campaign in Poland. Some ethnic German civilians living in Poland formed militias and joined in the crime, and special Einsatzgruppen targeted Polish Jews and intellectuals for executions. In Przemyśl, for example, an Einsatzgruppe shoots 500 Jews in mid-September. Regular Wehrmacht units also killed Polish prisoners and civilians. Army commanders like Franz Halder will later say that the Nazi leadership is clear about the purpose of the war. It was the intention of the Führer and Göring to destroy and exterminate the Polish people. In the town of Częstochowa, 42nd Division troops massacre about 1,000 civilians, including 150 Jews, on the false pretext that civilians are firing on German troops. Helena Spilmann witnesses the killings. On the town square were gathered several thousand people, men, women, and children. The whole square was surrounded by German soldiers who held their rifles at the ready. They thoroughly searched the Polish and Jewish men. If they found a razor blade, shaving knife, or pocket knife, the man in question was brought to a nearby air raid trench and immediately shot. The Germans carry out similar massacres elsewhere on the pretext of mostly imaginary partisan action by civilians. In all, the Germans execute 12,000 to 15,000 Poles during the 5-week campaign, not including civilian victims of the aerial bombing. On October 4th, Hitler announces an amnesty for all Germans who've committed war crimes in Poland. The Soviets also commit crimes in their zone. They shoot or imprison Polish community leaders, officers, businessmen, wealthy farmers, landowners, and civil servants. Soviet authorities deport many to camps in the Soviet Union. They frequently shoot prisoners of war. After the brief battles of Grodno and Lviv, Soviet troops execute several hundred Polish defenders. During the campaign, some Poles turn violent against their ethnic German fellow citizens. In one incident at Bydgoszcz, enraged Poles killed 223 ethnic Germans, and the overall total might be as high as 6,000. As the Germans and Soviets impose their rule in occupied territory, Polish military resistance enters its final phase. In late September, there are only a few Polish pockets still holding out, at Modlin Fortress, Kotsk, and Warsaw. The Polish government flees to neutral Romania and then to France. The Germans tried to capture Warsaw as soon as possible, but they've assigned too few units for the task and they're inexperienced in urban warfare. The 180,000-man Polish garrison is low on ammunition and heavy weapons, but they fight back using the urban landscape, ruins, and street barricades for cover. Elements of the 10th German Division are held up by a group of young Polish soldiers. About 30 military cadets, gunners, dug in a field gun and sat in a cellar next to it. If one of our tanks or assault guns appeared, a crew jumped up and fired until they were killed. Then came the next ones. This single gun demolished 3 German assault guns and 1 field gun. The Luftwaffe bombs the city heavily, targeting power stations, the water system, and electricity infrastructure. There is no power and no water. Civilian Halina Regulska recalled the scene. Above us raged an inferno. One plane after another dove down onto us, and every time it seemed to us that this time we'd be hit. This expectation of death made our hearts stand still. September 25th marks the biggest aerial bombing attack in history to that point, with 370 German planes dropping incendiary bombs to start fires. Overall, the bombing kills about 40,000 Warsaw residents. Warsaw Mayor Stefan Starzyński broadcast desperate radio appeals to Britain and France. And you, our allies, who promised to help and swore you would stand by us no matter what are you doing? That is what the dead and dying are asking. By September 26th, though, his tone changes. For the last time, I call on our allies. I am not asking for help. There's no time for that anymore. I demand revenge. For the churches reduced to ashes, for the tears and blood of the innocent dead, for the suffering of those torn apart by bombs, burned up by phosphorus shells, or suffocated in collapsed cellars and bunkers. May all broadcasters who hear us, especially the French, repeat to the entire world: Warsaw is fighting. Poland is not yet lost. But the siege of Warsaw soon ends. Water shortages, the risk of disease, and the hopeless military situation forced the Poles to surrender on September 28th. Soon after, Modlin Fortress also gives up, though the pocket at Kotsk holds out until October 6th, marking the end of organized Polish resistance. The Germans hold a victory parade in Warsaw, filmed by well-known director Leni Riefenstahl. The remnants of the Polish army try to escape to neutral neighbors, and between 80 and 200,000 men succeed. On the way, some units, like that of Captain Romuald Galicki, run into armed opposition from unfriendly civilians in an echo of the inter-ethnic fighting of 20 years before. We march at night. There is no contact with the enemy. On the way, Ukrainian bands in villages Stepan, Maniewice, and Ratno were liquidated. The Polish campaign is over, and Nazi Germany and the USSR achieve their immediate goals. Stalin will soon say their friendship is, quote, sealed in blood. They also agree to modify their zones of control. Germany gets more of Poland and more Soviet raw materials needed for the war with France and Britain, while the Soviet Union can now include Lithuania in its sphere of influence. Moscow soon offers Vilnius to Lithuania, which accepts. The Germans also give a small piece of Polish territory to the Slovak state. The speed and destruction of the German victory is exploited by Nazi propagandists to create the image of an all-powerful Wehrmacht, and contributes to the myth of Blitzkrieg as a deliberate doctrine. In reality, the German High Command feels the army had been rushed into war by the political leadership before it was ready, and judges its performance and munition stocks to be insufficient for war with Britain and France. The German military suffers about 15,000 dead, 30,000 wounded, and 3,400 missing. They also lose 217 tanks, nearly 10% of those deployed. The Red Army loses about 750 dead and 1,800 wounded. Polish losses are much higher. In the military, between 70 and 120,000 dead, 130,000 wounded, and 700,000 prisoners taken by the Germans, and 220,000 prisoners taken by the Soviets. Between 1 and 200,000 Polish civilians are killed. As much as Poland's people have suffered during the dual invasion, the horrors of the occupation, both on the German and Soviet side, will soon bring much worse. We hope you liked our coverage of the invasion of Poland in 1939. We always strive to incorporate some lesser-known aspects of the famous campaigns into our videos. This is only possible because of our supporters on Patreon. If you want to go to patreon.com/realtimehistory, you can support our work directly with a monthly or annual contribution. Every amount matters and allows us to go the extra mile in our documentaries. That means more maps, more animations, more sources, and more research time. All thanks to your support. Again, that's patreon.com/realtimehistory. We want to thank Filip Czaska and Sofia Shirogorova for their help with this episode. If you want to learn more about the fighting early in the war, check out our video on the Soviet-Finnish Winter War. As usual, you can find all the sources for this episode in the video description below. And if you're watching this on Patreon or Nebula, thank you so much for the support. We couldn't do it without you. I'm Jesse Alexander, and this is a production of Real Time History, the only history channel that would please personally to declare war on Mr. Molotov.